Welcome to this edition of Northern Business Leaders, in association with professional services firm Deloitte. In this edition, we're talking to a successful businesswoman who's not only been successful in business, but also in promoting women in tech. She was the CEO of the Year for the English Women's Awards, and she's CEO and co-founder of a highly successful Leeds-based firm, Panintelligence. Welcome, Zandra Moore.
Thank you.
Zandra, let's talk about Panintelligence. It's been growing 20% every year. Tell me about what it does and who its customers are.
Thank you, Natalie. Panintelligence is a data analytics software developer. We help software companies and their customers to get better insights from data, not just on what's happening today, but also on what's likely to happen tomorrow. So predicting outcomes. People call that machine learning, but what we try and do is make that incredibly easy for anybody to be able to get the value out of the data that they already have in their organisations. We're a small company growing fast with great ambitions. All of our team are based here in Leeds, and as a software company, we're predominantly a technical organisation.
Thank you. So tell us about the journey. You started out as a spin-out with just 6 of you. You're now up 40. What have the main milestones been in that journey?
That's a great question. We were a part of another technology company in Leeds called PanCredit. So they were a big software vendor for the banks and financial intermediaries. We were a small team within that company, and we had developed what was the early stages of Panintelligence as a decisioning engine for the big banks. That business got acquired, and as a small team we decided that we would spin out Panintelligence and did a management buyout back in 2014. As a small team of 6 people, we sort of literally walked the server across the car park over to another building, and really started a journey of taking this product outside the financial services space into other software vendors, and that journey has been what we've stayed focused and true to over those 5 years, and we've grown that business from 6 people now to 40. As you've said, 20% year-on-year growth, which is fantastic, and we're just about to move into a Series A, having bootstrapped the business from inception, and real ambitions to scale and move the business outside of the UK with an international lens, starting in the US.
Fantastic. So let's talk about that scale up, which you're going through right now. Slightly different approach. You asked the potential investors to pitch to you. So go through that, if you wouldn't mind.
I think it started for me as a journey on a programme, a scale-up programme, where I think the art of the possible for us as a business in how we might approach the funding market became clear. I think what I realised in doing that scale-up programme was that actually we had a very attractive business and proposition. We have 75% recurring revenues. We are a product company and not dependent on consultancy and services. And actually the market of data analytics and machine learning and AI has a huge amount of interest from venture funds, and actually there was not many good opportunities out in the market. So we decided to sort of flip it on its head a little bit and work and instruct an advisor to manage a process for us and go to market asking for interested parties to give us an opportunity to pitch to them and them to us, really. And we're just finalising that now, and we're in a position of being in due diligence, and will have completed that first round of funding within the next month or so.
Fantastic. And that's for 2.4 million.
That's for the growth capital. There is an opportunity for us in this process to also rebalance the cap table around those people that are going to really accelerate the growth for the company, which we've also been able to cater for in the transaction, which has been great, and it really shores us up for the next phase of growth, of which we will be looking to more than double the turnover within the first couple of years, and the staff numbers as well.
Fantastic. Now, one of those potential funders was the Northern Powerhouse Investment Fund. Tell us a little bit about your experience with them.
So the Northern Powerhouse Fund I'd not heard of before we started on the fundraise process. In fact, this is the first time I've taken a business through a fundraise. They were presented to me as somebody we should consider, and they did get involved in the process. Interestingly for us, we found accessibility to the loan side of the Powerhouse Fund easier for us as a business than actually the venture side, and subsequently we've found ourselves not following through with that. Not that it doesn't remain a key cornerstone to us enabling the economy in the north, but I think there are some ways in which perhaps that fund could be more accessible to businesses like ours, and I think there's some opportunity to do that, and we would be keen to enable that if we could.
That's very interesting, thank you. So now I'd like us to talk about your personal journey. So what was your initial interest in the IT sector?
I was lucky to have a role model, and not many people do. My mother was her own powerhouse, really, as an early woman in tech in the Leeds community. She was at the starting point and foundations of a number of new innovative sectors in the region, including internet service provision with Planet Online, with cloud and hosted infrastructure through in technology, and is still one of those people today that people come up to me and say, "How's your mum?" Because they have a story about how she influenced and inspired them as a role model in her career. So it's very easy for me to imagine myself in IT when you have that kind of role model at home. So unlike most people, I left university with a very clear vision of what I wanted to do. I wanted to be my mum, really, but more importantly, I wanted to work in the technology sector, and I had a clear vision for wanting to be in a leadership role and grow a tech business in the region, and that's always been with me from a very, very early age.
And something else which is quite fascinating, your interest in football.
Yeah, found me late in life at that one. That's definitely not been a passion that started from a young age. I've never played football. I've never actually been passionate about following the game up until recent years, and it was my children that brought me to that. So my children are now 13 and 11. My daughter was playing football with boys, and you get to an age where suddenly boys realise that there's a girl on the pitch with them, and the dynamic changes. The club that both my children played at didn't have a girls' team, so my daughter, who has absolute faith and belief in me, said, "Mummy, you can do anything. Let's set up a girls' football team." And how can you answer anything but okay when you have that kind of unfaltering belief in you? So I became an FA football coach and trained to do that, and now I have 47 girls across 3 age groups. I coach the under-14s, and I now have a deep love of football and follow Leeds United with passion and disappointment, but it's a real joy, and it's a real joy to be able to enable young women to embark on a hobby that really gives them the foundations for life skills, which actually really translate to the workplace, and team building and working together and playing to your strengths are all things that from sport really translate into the workplace. So it's become a passion I found, and one I don't think that will leave me either. So
fantastic. So one of the questions which I'd like to ask you is, clearly relatively fearless in setting something up, such as a girls' football team. At what point did you decide that you would rather run your own business opposed to working for someone?
Yeah, again, there's a tipping point, I think. These things sometimes find you don't find them. When I became a mother, it became increasingly difficult to maintain a senior leadership role as an employee in an organisation on a part-time basis, which is what I needed at the time. I was a sales director of a software company. It's difficult to have a field-based role and expect to manage and lead teams, and I realised actually I needed to sort of take control of that opportunity for myself at that stage in my career. I was already looking for opportunities to either be invested in a business or certainly have options or holding of a company, but it was at that point I realised I should probably just go for it. set up my own independent consultancy to software vendors, worked with lots of startup tech companies, which is where really Panintelligence and the journey of Panintelligence started for me. So they were a client that used me as an interim sales leader resource, and that resulted in me having an opportunity to buy the business alongside my other co-founders. So I think adversity brought about great opportunity, and I think sometimes you need to look for opportunity, and that's what happened for me, really.
And we've spoken about adversity, but let's also talk about diversity. So 17% female represented in the tech sector. What can we do more to increase that diversity?
It's become something that I'm increasingly wrestling with within my business, never mind as an agenda which I've become increasingly engaged in outside of the company. It's really quite embarrassing to be in a sector that is so young and to have such a challenge around diversity. There are things we can do and things that we need to take a good look at, our practices and the approaches to bringing talent into organisations that I think the whole tech sector needs to continue to ask themselves about. For me, it's not been as difficult. I think where you have an intentional focus on maintaining a diverse culture and workforce and adopt an approach to making sure that you are definitely seeking candidates from every possible community, that will invariably give you a greater diverse pipeline of people into your organisation. So we are very intentional about how we do that, but it's still difficult, and the tech sector is suffering from a gap in the STEM pipeline of young women choosing STEM skills, moving from primary education into further education, where that drops off significantly. And there are organisations, that one that I sit on the steering group for called Founders for Schools, which is very much tackling that agenda, and we're working in Leeds with all of the schools to see how we can reduce that drop off and maintain girls into STEM subjects so that the pipeline is even bigger for us as a sector. So it is a combination of the two, pipeline and policies and approach to making sure you're fishing in all the ponds that are available.
Do you feel we're making up ground where diversity is concerned?
I think it's been really interesting to see how the voice that has been given to the agenda of diversity, not just gender diversity, but across the board, the voice that now has across organisations and in the media, I think has been a positive influence in really getting people to think and challenge themselves on how that can be addressed. I think some diversity agendas get more focused than others. We particularly care about neurodiversity here, and we look to make sure that it's a safe working environment for anybody with perhaps a challenge around abilities that may be difficult for them to work in an organisation comfortably. For example, autism in IT is quite common to find developers that actually have those kind of spectrum disorders, so making sure that they have an environment that they feel they can work within is really important. So we don't just tackle diversity from a gender point of view, but I'm probably best known for probably banging that drum, if I'm being brutally honest. So I run a women's network called Lean in Leeds. We have 600 members. They're all professional women in the Leeds community. And that agenda is about us empowering women to challenge themselves as to what they can do to make that change happen, both for themselves and for their organisations. So it's a real empowerment movement from my point of view in making sure that we positively change the focus on what we as a community of women in the region can do to accelerate our own opportunities and promote positive change in organisations that will really enable everyone to succeed.
And it's an incredible group, that. The largest outside of London, I understand, so congratulations with that. And I think one of the questions that we are addressed with is around the future of men. You know, how far do we take the diversity agenda? And those questions are often raised by men. So, you know, will we come to a tipping point where we do need to reconsider, or are we still some distance away from that?
as a leader of a business, I cannot get away from the fact that it's always about the right person for the job. Mm-hmm. And we always have to ask ourselves that question, striking the balance between diversity and culture and people that can deliver the objectives for all the stakeholders, to ensure that the business is growing, profitable, sustainable, because ultimately without that there is no organisation and culture and opportunity. So it's a difficult balance to maintain. I think it is important that as leaders we are intentional in keeping a focus on diversity. I think we are able to improve opportunities for as much variety of opportunity for everybody in our organisations, in how we recruit, how we retain, how we return people back to our workplaces. And I think there's always work to be done, but I don't think that should ever be focused on one particular area of diversity, and it's a big agenda and it's not easy for anybody to get right. But as long as we keep that as a forefront of our strategy and thinking, then we're more likely to keep a balance on that with business objectives in mind. So I don't think it's always about the gender agenda. And if we don't make it always about the gender agenda and we make it about diversity, then I think we're more likely to strike the balance.
And in utopia, do you feel that there's a place for diverse groups, or would that be something which fails to exist?
So I see in my business innovation thrive, and I know this is said a lot and it's true though. Innovation does thrive through diversity. You want people from every stage of life to be involved in innovating and bringing ideas to the table, because they all have different perspectives and different lenses on the value that might bring to the communities that you serve. You want them to have different values and different approaches to solving problems, in order to challenge things like bias and make sure that ethics and things are considered. So diversity absolutely brings about innovation and drives innovation into a positive way that will ensure that your business will be competitive and lead in the market. So I don't think it's a question of I don't know, I'm not painting a picture of what the utopia is, but what I'm saying is the utopia for me is that everyone values that, and every organisation sees the value that diversity brings beyond it just being a we should. We should because it will help us to compete and it will help us to deliver solutions which actually will enable us to grow and prosper. And when we see that that's a real correlation, then it will just become at the heart of the decisions that everyone makes. So for me, it's just that being inherently part of leadership thinking and focus.
Thank you. Zandra, we've seen the play space and now we're in the workspace. Tell us a little bit about the culture here.
Yes, we have a culture where people can bring their whole self to work, but more importantly, it's about a place where they can feel comfortable, can work in a way that brings the best out in them. We very much work to a strengths approach, so we don't build a role, people don't have to build themselves around a role, we build a role around the person. And for me, the best way to get the best out of a team is to ensure that they have the space to be creative, innovative and can contribute. So we make it very open here, it's incredibly supportive and it really works in driving our culture.
Thank you, Zandra. We'll be back with another episode of Northern Business Leaders, brought to you by professional services firm Deloitte.